of our workshop, where we learned about the updates from COP26 related to the enhanced transparency framework, and we also went through important topics such as the Ipcc guidelines for the land use sector, and we learned about different methodologies and approaches how to improve data collection for the GAG inventory in the land use sector. And today we will have, I think, one of the most exciting sessions where we will learn about the different tools that can help to improve data collection and can help enhance the inventory in the land use sector. So please be with us and be also active in raising your questions and concerns related to these topics. And yeah, I'm very excited and looking forward to today's session. I will hand over to Sikai Ngarize, who will moderate the session today. Please, Sikai, let's start.
Thank you, Rosa. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome back. Maybe just a quick comment again. Today, we will not be having the breakout groups or parallel session. We will have the sessions as they look on the agenda. So there'll be no breakout groups because it will give us an opportunity to discuss the topics while we are together in one room. Maybe just a quick recap of what we discussed yesterday. The first thing maybe again, as Rosa has said, was the introduction of the Ipcc guidelines, 2006 Ipcc guidelines, and the treatment of land use representation in the guidelines. So we learned that it's important first to stratify your total land area again into managed and unmanaged, and then define your land use classes, but also align your national land use classifications with the Ipcc land use categories. We also learned about the importance of generating land use matrices, but also tracking of land use change across time using the different approaches to land representation of the Ipcc. Today, we are going to cover the use of Ipcc splicing techniques in generating a consistent time series, in particular for the land area data. When you have gaps in your data. We will also look at the tools, as Rosa has indicated, the different tools, remote sensing tools that are used in collecting activity data that is then used to input into the inventory. The FAO will discuss their Collect F tool as well as the Logic tool, which is used in developing land representation information for greenhouse gas inventories. Without much further ado, I will go into my presentation. Marcelo, are we still doing the Mentimeter? My apologies. So we will again start with our icebreaker on the Mentimeter, and Marcelo is gonna put up the slide on the.
Yes, thank you, Sikai. Hello, everybody. My name is Marcelo Teoto Rocha. I work as a consultant for Ricardo, supporting this workshop. Please, let's break the ice with some feedback inputs from you. And to do this, we're going to use the Mentimeter. So please go to menti.com and use the code 4508022. I think you also can find a link in the chat. I'm presenting now my screen, so I cannot see the chat, but I trust Aaron has or Alex have put in the chat the link. So if you click this link, it will go directly to the Mentimeter slide that you see now in the screen. And there are two questions that we want to use here to start our discussion. The first one is, what are the main challenges to generate a consistent time series using agreed Ipcc gap filling techniques? Sakai will present to you what these techniques are, but for those of you that have already worked with Ipcc, you are familiar with that. If you don't have yet the knowledge about these techniques, don't worry. Just give us what you think will be the main challenge to generate consistent time series. So let's wait a little bit to see some responses here in these first questions, and then we can move to the other one. So please go ahead and put the input, use this Mentimeter to put your responses to us. Nobody wants to break the ice. If you're having problems using the Mentimeter, let us know as well. But the first 2 days, people were able to use and to give us some inputs in the ice break session. Okay, maybe when you think about this first question, let me also show you the other question. If you have also any experience using Collect Earth, you can then also share what was the experience, or just indicate if you have or not the experience with Collect Earth. You can also put the responses using Mentimeter, and you can go from one question to the other. So you may choose to respond to both questions or just to one. Let me see if somebody has put, oh yes, now we have some responses here, thank you. So no experience yet, don't have much experience. And then one of the challenges is lack of historical data. And that's for sure is one challenge that these techniques are supposed to overcome. But of course, if you have a lot of lack, then the applying this technique becomes a problem. But Sekai will discuss this in more details with you in a moment. So missing data, okay. Let's check if the second question have some responses. No experience, not familiar with the tool, no experience at the moment. So Afonso will guide us with this Collect tool, and he will explain to us how this can be used. And you see that is a very interesting, very useful tool to assist us in working with data collection and treatment of this information in order to prepare the AFOLU estimatives for the GHG inventory. Oh, good. There is a positive feedback and good experience to support the quality control. I believe also can explore this kind of utility of the tool. Quality control is a very interesting aspect. More information is coming for the first one. This information available and the missing that sometimes have very different circumstances. Example, different forest management practice pre-20,000 and post-20,000. So Sekai, maybe you can, in the presentation, explore a little bit about this, the quality or the differences between the information that you have to work across the time series. That's good. Okay. We have some feedback already. You can still use this Mentimeter and the code to give the response a little bit later. We know that once we enter in the presentations and the debate and we end the workshop, we tend to not use this tool anymore. But anyway, it will still be available. And if you don't want to respond now, or if you think something else during the presentation and want to put on record, please go to menti.com using the link that you saw in the chat or the code 4508022 and record here your inputs if you think something additional later on. Okay, I will stop now the presentation and give the floor back to Sekai. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Marcelo. And thank you, everyone, for answering some of those questions. It gives us an indication of where you are. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes, we can see Sekai.
Okay, thank you. Well, yeah, as Marcelo has highlighted, and also from the responses that we saw on the Mentimeter there, it's an area where countries need experience in terms of understanding how to generate a consistent time series using agreed IPCC gap filling techniques. So today I will look at why is it important that time series consistency is maintained when you are compiling your greenhouse gas inventories. The challenges again that countries face when they're trying to generate a consistent time series, in particular in the land use sector. We'll look at the different IPCC splicing or gap filling techniques, and these are your overlap technique, the use of surrogate data, interpolation, extrapolation, and a bit of the summary. We will have an opportunity maybe towards the end to look at one or two exercises. Most of the gap filling techniques can be actually done in Excel files. So I think by the end of this presentation, I expect you to have a better, an appreciation of an overview of how to address data gaps, but also a general understanding of what methods are available, what tools are available that can help you to overcome some of these challenges in maintaining a time series consistency and gap filling, but also understanding how to determine which methods are best suitable for your country national circumstances, depending on the quality of data that is available. Now, why is time series consistency important? And first of all, you want to put the into context the concept of time series consistency in relation to the inventory. So inventories can help us to understand emission and removal trends. And again, in accordance with good practice guidance, these trends should not be overestimates or underestimates, so long as it can be judged. You may be aware that an inventory is not just an estimate of a single year, but it includes estimates of a number of years, hence the name time series of estimates. Annual estimates should also be comparable and reflect what we call real annual fluctuations, not changes in methodology. So it's important that they are calculated using the same method, but also using the same data sources for all the years. Of course, we appreciate that there'll be times when the same method and same data sets cannot be found for that particular time series due to lack of data. And again, this is where we need to understand which best IPCC splicing technique to use, depending on the data that we have. The challenges, some of which you have already mentioned during the Mentimeter exercise. Basically, we need to understand what to do when we come across some of these challenges. What do we do when we have data gaps, for example, in the land area data? And another case is like when we have land cover maps for different years, but we don't have data for the intervening years. In other words, we don't have activity data or area data. If you remember from the presentation yesterday, when we were looking at if you were using land cover maps from 2003, 2008, 2013, and 2018, I think that one should be the last one, you will find that you don't have land cover maps that allow you to then generate activity data for the intervening years. And this is where we can use the splicing techniques, but we have to choose the correct one for the type of data that we have. In some cases, you have new activity data that has become available, but you have no historical data for some historical years. Another thing is that a new source or sink category may be added to your inventory for which no historical data are available, or a new method may even be introduced at tier 2. And then you also need to ensure that you maintain time series consistency. In some cases, maybe your forestry department has stopped producing national forest inventory, or the data is not disaggregated enough for your wood removals, in that case for your timber data or your harvested wood products. These problems are particularly a challenge for the agriculture and LULUCF sectors. Again, maybe more elaboration here on why do data gaps occur. Again, you can have changes and gaps in data because you have more disaggregated data or other improvements have been made. For example, you have better surveys for the future years. In some cases, there could be even missing years. I think this is one of the responses I saw from your Mentimeter comments. Periodic data. I think this is one sector, maybe across all the inventory sectors. Data collection is not always done on an annual basis. So it's important that you take this into account when you're trying to generate a consistent time series. Again, as we have said here, common in the LULUCF sector, forest inventories could be done every 5 or 10 years. And in some cases, is the reason for the gaps is that there's no data at all. Now, Ipcc splicing techniques or gap filling techniques, what do we mean when we talk about gap filling or splicing techniques? Splicing means combining or joining more than one method or data series to form a complete time series. When do we apply splicing techniques? In most cases, we apply splicing techniques to address a change in a method or refinement. For example, when you introduce a new Tier 2 method, in the past, maybe you have been using default data in Tier 1. In some cases, again, we want to fill in the data gaps due to collection of data at different periods. The Ipcc 2006 guidelines provide several techniques that allow us to address these data gaps. As I have said in my introductory slide, we have the overlap technique, surrogate technique, interpolation, and extrapolation. Some of them are purely statistical methods or approaches. So it's important that you have a good understanding as well of Excel, or at least it helps to have a good understanding of Excel. Again, we need to select the correct gap filling techniques for particular circumstances, depending again on the quality of data. Now, the first approach is called the overlap method. Again, when do we apply this method? When you have a new method that has been introduced, but the data are not available for the earlier years. So for example, when you're implementing a higher tier method, you also want to develop a time series that is based on the relationship, in other words, the overlap that has been observed between a previously used method and the new method. This will make more sense when we look at maybe the small exercise we can have a look in Excel. It is also preferable to compare the overlap for multiple years rather than to look at a single year. If there's no consistent relationship or overlap between the methods, then you cannot apply this technique. So it's very important in some cases to even compare different techniques and see which one is best depending on the quality of the data. Again, as you can see here, this is an example. Or you can plot easily this in Excel, and using this equation that you see here, we will have a quick look in the exercises where these equations are actually computed in Excel. As you can see here, we have a consistent relationship between the Tier 1 method and the Tier 2 method. And what you see here is the completion of the time series, again, using the Tier 2 methods. As you can see here, the Tier 2 method was introduced here in 1995, but we didn't know what the historical emissions were using the Tier 2 method. So as you can see, you can actually see that there's a close link here between the Tier 1 method and the Tier 2. In other words, that you can see that there's a trend, a linear trend, if you like, here in this case. So this is a good example. If you could quickly plot this in Excel and you can see something like this, then you know that you can apply the overlap method. But if you were to quickly plot this in Excel and you come up with something like this, this is an example where you cannot apply the overlap method because the relationship between the Tier 1 method and the Tier 2 method is inconsistent. Again, I've just given you an example that I've taken from the Excel files that I'm going to go through with you. Again, as you can see here, you have your tier 1 method, and then you've got your tier 2 method, which was introduced in 2000. And what you need to establish is whether there's a good relationship between the years when both methods are used, and then you use that relationship to generate the numbers that you see here, the estimates that you see in purple, in light lilac there. Now, the surrogate method, again, this one requires that you relate your emissions or your removal to an underlying activity or other indicative data. So if you look in the example that I have there, you have coal production and measured emissions. So the activity or the underlying data is your coal production. Your data or statistical data that is related to the emissions may be proportional to the production. For example, this is just another example, vehicle distances traveled and population. So you need to make sure that, again, there's a relationship between your emissions and the surrogate that can be developed, because the surrogate is more like a proxy that is used to establish the relationship between the emissions and the activity that you are trying to better understand in terms of the emissions or for the missing years. It is good practice to actually ensure that you use multiple years rather than just use a single year to compare the emissions. Now, in this, again, approach, first of all, you must identify your surrogate or your proxy variables. What do we mean by that? So if you have some actual data, you calculate simple correlation coefficients. Again, that's why I was saying there's also, you need to have an understanding of some of these simple statistical concepts here. You should also have more than 1 year of the actual data to establish a relationship with that surrogate parameter. In our previous slide, I was showing coal production and emissions. So if the correlation is not very obvious, then you may want to consider doing some regression techniques to see if the relationship between the actual and the surrogate parameter can be found. If you have no data, then you would want to justify why you have chosen the surrogate technique as the best way to defend the parameter that you're trying to establish. So again, here's an example here where you have a surrogate parameter data that you can see there in blue, and then you have your emissions, but you have you don't have emissions for 1990, and then you want to use this relationship here to establish your Y0 there. But we can have a look at this in Excel again. And then the interpolation technique. Here, when you have detailed statistics that are collected every few years, again, this is where, for example, you have survey data, but then you've got some years that are missing. You want to, the estimates for the intermediate years in the time series can be developed again by applying this the interpolation technique. As you can see, what you see in red there is the estimates that have been obtained using the interpolation technique. So they should be an overall trend that you can see. I think if you look at this, you can see that there's a sort of an increased linear trend. So you need to be able to establish a trend that is clear. Then you can be sure that you can apply this interpolation technique. And then again, if the information on the general trends or the underlying parameters is available, then again, you can actually use the surrogate method to validate the interpolation method in this case. So again, it is good practice to compare interpolated estimates with surrogate data as a QC check. Here's an example. I've tried to see if I could find examples that we can best reflect the AFOLU sector. And then as you can see in this example, this is the equation that we can then compute in Excel. Again, you need to have a linear, or if it's not linear, justify choice. Should not be used for variables that have large variability from year to year. So the example here that we're going to have a look quickly in Excel is showing you the total forest area from 1990 to 1994, and then you have a gap. If you think of this as maybe you have your land cover maps here, but they only give you data up to 1994, and then nothing else was done in the intervening years. And then again, maybe you have another land cover data that you were able to collect these information on activity data for the land areas. As you can see here, we have total forest area, and then forest land, remaining forest land, and land converted. This is just an example we have included here to try and demonstrate this technique. And then with the extrapolation, again, when the data for the base year or the most recent year is not available, then you would want to apply the extrapolation technique. So the data can be extrapolated if you assume that the trend in emissions remains constant over the period of extrapolation. So again, it's important that you understand this simplifying assumptions. It should not be used if there's no constant trend over time. As you can see here, you can actually see that the trend is constant. Again, it's linear, but in some cases it could be more complex. So it's important that you understand that you're able to characterize what the trend looks like first before you apply this. And then here, again, this is the example, you filling in the gaps for the time series. Again, you should not use it if there's large variability in the data. And then again, this is an example that you must have received this from Rosa, if this is in Excel. So I just took one of those examples and I put it here just to demonstrate. As you can see, you can either use a simple mathematical or actually extrapolation here, or you can use the focus function in Excel. Yes. Quality of time series and documentation. Again, this is very important in some cases that you can compare the results of multiple approaches where it is possible to, oops. Okay, yeah. Plotting and comparing the results of the splicing techniques is a useful way actually of doing your own QC check or quality control. If these different splicing techniques produces different results, then you should consider which method is more realistic. Again, it's very important again to compare recalculated estimates with previous estimates. This again can be a useful way of quality checking your recalculation, but also in particular when you're introducing higher tier methods, which may actually produce different results than the lower tier method. It's important again that all recalculations and measures taken to improve the time series consistency should be well documented and reported, in particular to explain the reason for the recalculation, the effect of that recalculation of the time series, but also the choice of the splicing technique that has been used. So in summary, we need to have consistent estimates of removals for all the years, applying the same methods and data sources. Where it is not possible, you should follow the time series consistent guidance to provide consistent estimates, again, using these recommended Ipcc splicing techniques. So we need to ensure that the quality of the time series, all the quality checks are applied to the time series and they're well documented. Okay, I'm going to just show you a few examples in Excel. Yeah, I think, I don't know, Rosa, have they all received this as well, this file, or not yet?
No, we didn't send it,
okay.
but we will send it all after the workshop. Yeah.
Okay. Again, this example, I think I just showed you a snapshot of this. It's very, maybe I shouldn't say straightforward, but because maybe this is your first time you'll be using the gaps. So Excel has, you need to have at least a basic knowledge of Excel as a tool, I guess, in this case, for doing these splicing techniques. As you can see, the interpolation technique, we just saw the example that I showed you on the slide. It's this very same example here.
Sorry, Sika. Did you want to share the Excel sheet?
My apologies. Sorry, I didn't upload it. Okay.
You can see it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, let me. There you go.
Yes, now.
My apologies. Okay, you can see it now?
Yeah.
Yes. Maybe we may not be able to go through all the examples here, but this example is quite interesting where you can use interpolation techniques. If you recall yesterday, we were discussing the generation of activity data from land cover maps. And in some cases, we also just learned this morning that it's not always possible to generate activity data on an annual basis because national forest inventories are done every 5 to 10 years. A lot of surveys in the agricultural sector, again, they're quite expensive to do. So they are done every maybe 10 years. So it's important that as compilers, you are familiar with these techniques in terms of how you can gap fill your data. So if you look at the equation that you see here, this is the equation that you would apply if you wanted to implement the interpolation, or if you have chosen interpolation for this type of data. As you can see here, for the total forest area, we have our areas here up to 1994, and then we have a gap. And then they start again from 1999. And then we actually included another example here of forest land remaining forest land and land converted to forest land. So if you wanted to gap fill your activity data, first you must understand the equation that is recommended in the Ipcc guidelines, which is this equation here. I always think of it, if you want to simplify this equation, if you were just to write these parameters here as they are, so your y start here will be the year when the last area when you had your information here, which is this number here that you see there, that one. Yeah, this is your y start. I think I'm just putting it in standard formula, and then I'll show you again in Excel what you need to do in the formula that is down there. And then your T1 and your T start divide by your T end and your T start. As you can see here, I've also labeled the T start there as the 1994 and the T end there as 1999. It helps you to then substitute this in this equation. So your T end 1999 and your T start 1994. Multiply this asterisk here is used as a multiplication sign in Excel, and then by your y end, which is this value here, and I've just taken the values for total forest area here. So the numbers that you see down here, I've taken them from total forest area there, and then minus your y start here, which will be the value that's 924 and 924 2051, which is that value there. So what you need to do is to first substitute these parameters here and define what they are in your data set, like I've done there. And then what we want to do here is to make sure that we fill in the data, the variable T here, which are the missing emissions. In this case, it's not missing emissions, it's missing activity data, which is your area information here, your total forest area between the years of 1994 and 1999. So if you want to then compute this in Excel, yeah, you will then come here. I don't know if you are familiar with the use of the $sign to lock the constants in Excel. So basically, this equation is the same as what you see here, but we've only just applied the functions in Excel that then allow you to compute the activity data information here. So again, here you have your y start, which is if you want to lock the y start, again, you want to lock the cells here, like you put your equal sign and then your $sign, and then you select the cell. Again, you lock the sign there. So you can see that your F3 is that number there, which is the same as the number that I've included here in that cell. Is this number here. And then plus sign, which is your y start plus. Again, you compute this part of the equation. here. This is what you see here in brackets, which is your G2 minus the, again, T1 minus Y start, which is what you have here, and then T end minus T start, which is what you have here. So, and then you put another bracket here, you got double brackets because you want to close this. This is more like implementation of the board mass principles in statistics. And then you want to then multiply that by this last bracket here, which is your multiply open bracket again, you log using the $sign, the cell 3 here, again, you minus your Y start there, here. So once you have done it in this, you copy your formula across by, I don't know if you're familiar, by just dragging this like that. And then it gives you the rest of the missing years. So it's important that when you compute the first value here, everything is correct, because if there's an error in this formula, it means that all these areas as well will be incorrect. So I would maybe urge you to, after this session, if you can practice, but first of all, just first understand how to define these parameters in Excel and the use of the $sign to log those values that are constant, that are not changing. You see that in my file, I've just tried to put some text here just to explain what the constants are and what the variables are. So you need to know what your constants are. Those are the values that you log using the $sign. So that's very important so that you don't make a mistake when you are copying the formula across. So the most important thing is to first understand which equation is recommended in the Ipcc guidelines for computing the interpolation and using the technique for gap filling. I just wanted to show you down here what those completed graphs look like. As you can see here, these are the gap filled years that you see here at the top, that you see here. The numbers in lilac are the values that we have used to gap filling here and here. So as you can see here, you have a consistent time series of your area and area change for the total forest area, forest land remaining forest land, and land converted to forest land. Maybe another example here. Again, maybe the overlap method is another method where, again, I always say, first of all, define what these parameters mean, and then you compute them in Excel. So as you can see here, the X and Y stand for your emissions under a tier 1 method. Is it too small? I'll try to make it bigger. I just need to move it around a bit. Is this better? Yes, okay. So first of all, understand the equation that is recommended in the 2006 Ipcc guidelines, and then understand the different parameters, what they mean, and then define them. Once you've done that, then you can start computing these formulas in Excel using the Excel functions. So for example, your X and Y here stand for the emissions using the tier 1 method. Remember, we said the overlap method, you can apply it when you have a relationship between a previous and an existing and a new method. So in this case, the old method was tier 1, and then you also introduced a tier 2 method there in 2000. Then you want to use this relationship here to establish your missing years here, but when you didn't have any, you didn't introduce the tier 2 method. So all of these emissions here have been generated by the introduction of a tier 2 method. So first of all, you want to define your Y over X, yeah, and then in this case, your y over x, like I've said, allows you to then establish a relationship, and that becomes a constant. If you look at y over x here, what we have done is L4 over L3. So basically you're dividing your tier 1 method by your tier 2 method. And then you do that for the whole time series so that you can establish that relationship here. And then here is the sum of all of these numbers here. And then you know that your N is the year 2005, the last year when the emissions were estimated using the new method, and M is the first year when your emissions were estimated using the tier 2 method. And then the NM plus 1, again, if you are using Excel, as you can see there, you know your N, you know your value, and a plus 1. So that's how you would compute this, by equal sign. So your K8 minus your K9 plus 1, that gives you these values here. Once you have defined and computed all these parameters here, so your 1 over N, again, bracket, divide by N minus N plus 1. So you're practically using these values that we have defined here. So if you look at this equation, this part is that one, and then your y over x sum of will be the value that you have here, that you have computed here. So first of all, compute this equation. Once you've computed the equation, you've defined all your parameters, and then you now want to take these elements of the equation and use them here to do your gap filling. But first you must establish the relationship of the method, tier 1 method and tier 2 method. And again, if there's a linear trend, if you look at the completed values there, you can actually see that there's a linear trend in the emissions that were estimated using a tier 1 method and the emissions that were estimated using a tier 2 method. I have also included notes here in my file, so please do take your time and go through these examples. If we had more time, we could have just given you blanks and then we have to work it out. That's probably the best way to practice. But because of time, I will not be able to go through all of the individual cases. But again, they are very well explained. And first of all, define your equation, understand what it means, and then use the Excel functions here. So what I've done here is just to help you to understand what the standard formula is like, and then use the Excel functions to then compute, and then you get your values here. And the same thing with the extrapolation. With the extrapolation, there are two ways of doing it. You've got a simple extrapolation here, which is just a straightforward. Again, you'll be applying the equation here. So what you see there in pink are the values that have been produced using the simple extrapolation method here. And this one is quite straightforward in terms of how you do the computation in Excel. And then the focus function, again, this function you can find in Excel. So you'd want to compute your values. And actually, it's always good to actually compare the values that you get using the focus function and the values that you get using your simple extrapolation. Again, if you remember that we would implement this extrapolation if you don't have the values for the latest year of the inventory or for the base year. And then in here, I've explained again a bit on how the computation is done. There's also, I think not all versions of Excel have this focus function. So that's probably one thing to remember. This was introduced in the Excel versions from 2016 onwards. So that's maybe something to take note of. I think because of time, I think I'm going to stop here. And then we can have a discussion session on this. So I will Or actually, maybe I can leave my slides on for a minute in case people want to ask questions. We're gonna have maybe go into the Q&A session. Let me just see if there are any questions already in the. There's a chat meeting in the chat.
There is a hand. Hassan has his hand or her hand up, Sakai.
Okay. Okay, maybe
Hi,
I'll wait.
yes.
Hi, Hassan.
Hi, Sekai. Nice to see you. Thanks, Marcelo. Can I be heard? Because sometimes there's an issue with my microphone.
Yes,
okay.
we can hear you.
Fantastic. My apologies. I only joined just like the last 10 minutes because I had another meeting and I wasn't able to join yesterday's productive session as well. I'm from Singapore, and your last bit, Sekai, on this forecast function and the simple extrapolation was kind of interesting for me to see, because I think looking forward to the reporting under BTR, that's x minus 4, x minus 2 bit would come in kind of relevant for us. But I just, the forecast function is new to me. And I think what I saw correctly was you forecasted back from 1998. Is there a reason why you didn't go all the way back from 1991? So why did you start from only 1998? And that was one. But maybe you can give a sort of like a bit more, I guess, forecast function would be more. Am I breaking up?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, so
okay.
maybe I stop there.
Why did we
Thanks, Sekai.
Forecast from 1998? That's what you're saying.
No, yeah, why? I think I saw in the formula, the extrapolation was using 1998, but can I go all the way back to 1990 as well, if need be?
Maybe not, because what you want is this technique. First of all, if you look at how we define the parameters here, what your y(t) minus 1 is, what your y(t) minus 2 is, because it doesn't allow you to go back to 1998, because the methods require that you implement, you know what the information, the weight, in this example, is amount of waste, total amount of waste, the year prior to the current year in this case. So you cannot forecast back using 1998, because the equation requires that you implement either 2 years prior to the current year, if there's a relationship here. But if you look at the, maybe you could say that actually, because if you look at the graph, 1998 and 2003, right? You want to use the linear relationship here to
that's correct.
Yeah.
The reason
so
it's
your question is right, because the linear relationship starts in 1998. So you don't want to use the relationship here where you don't see that linear trend. You want to take advantage of the years where you have a linear relationship. So I don't know, because maybe you didn't have this, actually, I did indicate this because this is a question that we always get. So the relationship starts in 1998, and we want to project that relationship forward because these are linear projections.
Okay, got your point.
We use this stretch here between 1998 and 2003. So your question is very relevant. When you get this file, I've included some notes here again to explain a little bit about how we do the computation using the focus function and what these values are. So for example, the J2 and J3, we are looking for a relationship between the range of years, 1990 to 2003. But to then implement the focus function, we want to first find the part in the trend where there's a linear relationship. And in this case, you were very right. So the linear relationship starts from 1998 and then we want to use this relationship to project forward. So these are like, I'll probably say it's like basically projections, simple projections in a way. The focus function is just the same thing, but in a different way. As you can see,
thanks, Sekai.
If you see the results from the simple extrapolation and focus function, they are not very different. If you were to round them up, I think I would say, yes. Yeah, that was a very good question. So please do take note of the notes that I have included. And I think I included yes, I've got it here. Yeah, I included an example from the version of 2016, because the previous versions of Excel won't have the focus function. So just remember that when you are applying this focus function technique in this case.
Sekai.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I don't want to prolong much the debate, but just to add to here, the important thing is that within the Ipcc you have different techniques, and then of course in Excel you're going to have different formulas. But the main message maybe is that you have to know a little bit about the data that you have and what you want to achieve in order to choose the best approach to follow. And of course, each approach will have some kind of limitations. And I think this is a good example that it doesn't make sense to try to go before 98 because you don't have a linear, the data that you have before 98 doesn't have this linear characteristic. So if you try to do it with data before, the outcome will not be the best one. Anyway, we should move on, Sekai, I guess, to other presentations as well. But please, if you have further questions, just take note and put forward to us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Marcela. Okay, I think I have unshared my presentation now. I think we have a 5-minute break, right? After this Q&A session.
No, we will move on to Alfonso's presentation, and then after that we will have a break.
And okay, that's okay. So Alfonso, the floor is yours. We're gonna have a presentation from Alfonso from the FAO on the Collect Earth tool. So Alfonso, the floor is yours. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. Today I am here to speak about Collect Earth. Let me see if I can start my presentation. Do you guys see it?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so I am Alfonso Sánchez Paus. I'm the product manager for Collect Earth and Earth Map, two of the open forest tools in FAO. I'm also a land monitoring expert, and I have been supporting many countries now on their production of activity data for their forests, principally for the forest reference emission levels for the REDD+. But in any case, this is data that is also used for the greenhouse gas inventories. As I said, we work in something called the Open Forest Initiative within FAO, which is an initiative for production of tools for natural resource assessment and for basically anything to do with data collection in FAO. These are all open source and free to use by anyone without having to ask for any permission from us or anything like that. So yeah, everything is available in our website of openforest.org. Collect Earth has been already developed within Open Forest since the 2013, so it's a really mature product. So what is Collect Earth? Collect Earth is a modern or more modern way of doing visual interpretation, which is a methodology that has been used by for forest monitoring for many years. What we did was to link up this visual interpretation methodology with the Google tools. So basically, we are allowing users to use all the breadth of data of Google Earth, which I will show you later. There's a lot of historical imagery in Google Earth, and we also link to other sources of imagery to make the process easier for the user. Visual interpretation means this is a completely human process. So what we see, for instance, in this slide, on the left image, you see an island. Can't remember which island this is. Anyway, you see this island, and in the island there's a lot of little dots, and each of those little dots is what we see on the right, which is a plot. Okay, and in this plot, the user is supposed to click on that plot, look at the imagery that is found in Google Earth, in Google Earth Engine, in Bing Maps, in everything we have available, and try to assess what is there in the plot, within the plot, and how the plot has changed through the years. Okay, so this is a completely human process. There is no automation here. The operator or the interpreter must go plot by plot, collecting data on the changes within the plot. Okay, and you will ask why this doesn't really seem to make sense in 2022. We are already, no, because we should have better algorithms to do this automatically. But the problem is that to do the kind of assessments that we do at the land use level, to be able to produce maps automatically of land use subdivisions and the changes between land use subdivisions, considering the complexity of these changes, is very, very complicated. So we are yet not there. Mainly that we are not there, or if anyone is able to produce this kind of maps, it's actually very expensive and very complex process. So we are still, this human process is still a little bit easier and cheaper and faster than the actual computer-based process. Okay, so as I say, we do use this multi-temporal analysis. That for that we have a link between Collect Earth and other tools like Bing Maps, for instance, which is a Microsoft product that also has freely available imagery. We also, very importantly, link up to Google Earth Engine. I'll explain you later, which is a tool that also allows us to do a more in-depth time series analysis, because it's not just to visualize images, it's also to be able to access satellite data that allows us to chart, for instance, NDVI values like vegetation values, so we can see when there are changes on the forest. All right, and we also use other sources of imagery, for instance, like Planet, which is one of the latest players in the Earth observation business that has a lot of small satellites, and we have access to this monthly imagery, which gives us very, very good imagery for the last 3 years. So at least for the last 3 years, we have monthly imagery at good quality at 5 meters. And also, if you might even use Maxar, which is the digital globe imagery, if you have the money to pay for it, because that's actually licensed. As I say, one of the main things oops, wait a second. Let me first show you this is Google Earth history function. So when the user is assessing what's going on the plot, one of the main tools that we have is that we have the access to the high resolution imagery from Google Earth, which is this functionality that you have here in Google Earth Pro. I guess everyone has seen Google Earth. Google Earth is the software that you install in your computer, right? That allows you to access a lot of imagery. You have this function to go through the history of the plot. And here you have this example that you see that there is some deforestation going on right next to the plot. Okay, but here we see that the deforestation, okay, we're going backwards now. This is when nothing happened. And this is the latest image from 2018. Okay, so the deforestation is happening close to the plot in 2018. Va bene. So we don't control really in Google Earth history what are the images we have. But for that, we have this other thing, which is called Google Earth Engine. Google Earth Engine doesn't handle very high resolution imagery, but it allows you to access other type of imagery, like for instance, Sentinel and Landsat imagery, okay? And Landsat and Sentinel imagery are not as good. I mean, of course, the very high resolution is really, really, really good. So you can see like the shades of the trees and the types of the trees and the lines of the trees. These were speaking about resolution, lower resolution imagery, but that has a much higher cadence and is systematically collected, meaning that we have access to Sentinel-2 imageries from yesterday. So we can see if there is a deforestation event just happening yesterday, we can already see it today, okay, which is something we cannot do in very high resolution imagery. So applying this concept to this example that I just showed you, that there was a plot. You can see the little plot here. It's not super clear, no, but there is a plot here. Okay, and in the very high resolution images from Google Earth that I showed before, we see that there was deforestation coming to the plot, right? But in the latest images from 2018, we could not see that deforestation. While with this system that is called the Google Earth Engine app for Collect Earth, which is activated every time you click on a plot in Collect Earth, you get this window as well. So you can access the imagery from Landsat and from Sentinel-2. Here is not very good because it's very small, but you can see that at the end of the time series of the NDVI here, the vegetation goes down. So we see that this deforestation event that was happening up to 2018, very close to the plot, okay, actually moves in the plot in around this time, around 2020. June 28, 2020, we see that there's a deforestation here. So the message here is that even if we don't have very high resolution imagery available for every year in Google Earth, we have this access to the Google Earth Engine app, to this Landsat, Sentinel, MODIS data to be able to reproduce the vegetation index, as well as to understand when the changes happen when we speak about deforestation. Of course, this might be more difficult if we're speaking about degradation, or if we're speaking about land use changes that do not create such a great impact on the digital, on the spectral signature of the change. Okay, so in Collect Earth, we are trying to bridge the normal interpreters or normal users that maybe don't have a very high remote sensing knowledge, okay, to the breadth of data that we have from Google Earth Engine. Google Earth Engine, sorry, I didn't say, is a free product, is freely accessible by anyone. And again, it lets you access all this information anywhere in the world, and it's very fast as well. So it's a great product from Google, and I guess everyone has heard about this already, but if you haven't, but it's actually really, really good because you don't need to download anything. Everything is done on their servers. Okay, so we can speak about later. Again, just to explain this a little bit more, this what you see on the right is the vegetation indexes. Okay, so a vegetation index allows you to see from 2000 to right now, basically to yesterday, what is the vegetation status on that plot, inside that plot. We are speaking about what are the vegetation inside the plot, right? And then you can also click on these on these graphs and also access directly those images. And you see that, sorry, in this latest image, you see that the deforestation has happened already inside the plot. The orange is vegetation. The green is lack of vegetation. It's a little bit, it's not very logical, but let's say like green is bad, orange is good when it comes to forest. All right. Okay, this is the Google Earth Engine. We also have access to something called the NICFI Planet Imagery, but not in every country. So in most tropical countries, we do have it, not in every country though. And this also allows us to see change using this planet imagery, which you see is not as good as what we see in Google Earth Engine, which is very high resolution. This is 5-meter pixel resolution. But here we can also see how this plot, how the forest within that plot has been removed somewhere between around September 2020. Okay, here you see the dates. the imagery. So this is very important because what we want to collect in Collect Earth is not only the current land use, but how the land use has changed, right? Because at the end, the goal of Collect Earth is to produce a time series of activity data, okay, of land use changes, land use changes through the years. We usually start in 2000 because 2000 is the year where we start having something called Landsat. Landsat is the United States Geographical Survey program on Earth observation, and we have systematic data from 2000. Before 2000, there is other Landsat programs, but they are not systematic, so they are not easy to use. But from 2000, we have every 16 days you have an image anywhere around the world. Okay. So we are trying to produce a time series, and a time series for every single plot of what the land use has been on the plot, but not only to go on the forest settlement or cropland land use, but to go inside the land use subdivision. So we want to collect data at the land use subdivision level, which is what type of forest, what type of crop, what type of wetland is within the plot. Okay. Again, as I say, we use a sampling approach, means that a user, well, you see here, for instance, is Panama. In Panama, we have, I don't remember how many thousands plots. I think it was like 17,000 plots. So you have 17,000 plots. Each one of these little dots is a plot. And you see that depending on the area, you have different intensities of this grid. Okay, so for instance, here, you have a grid of I think it was 4 by 4 kilometers, so one plot every 4 kilometers, while in areas of high deforestation or where they were supposed to be higher deforestation, we have a more intense grid. Okay, so you had a grid of 2 by 2, so 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. There is one of these plots, and the data has to be collected in each one of the plots by a person. Okay. Yeah, we have a tool to generate these things, and there are also many approaches to generate a grid. So this is up to the data collectors or the people that handle the data collection that should decide how much time we actually have for data collection. Right? The more plots you collect, so the more data you collect, the better data you have. Basically, you reduce the uncertainties of the data by collecting more data. But of course, there is also the practical business that is like, okay, we would like to have perfect data. To have perfect data, you have to collect one plot for every hectare in your country, but that's not really doable, right? So you need to strike some kind of balance between uncertainty of the data and actually practicality of the tool. No, you cannot be collecting hundreds of thousands of plots because that would take you forever. Here you have an example of how a form works. So the form on each time you click on a plot, I don't know if I've showed you before. Let me just show you, remind you. Here you see when you click on this plot in Google Earth. So Collect Earth works together with Google Earth. It's a bit confusing because we have Collect Earth, Google Earth, okay, but Google Earth is working with Collect Earth, and when you click on the plot, you get this form, all right? And the data, the user fills the form. So here you have an example of how that works. So basically, in the form, within the form, we have validation. You have different types of fields that you can have, like selection boxes. You can have text or numbers or whatever. And the form itself is flexible. So we give you some ideas of what to do or what type of data to collect, but the form itself is flexible. It's up to the user to create a new form. So you have many different types of data collections. So we have the support to them multi-phase national forest inventories. So you have a first phase in remote sensing and a second phase on the field. We, of course, our bread and butter is the LULUCF assessments, the land use change and forestry assessments. Then we have many other projects using Collect Earth for setting baselines for restoration, for accuracy assessment of maps. When you produce a map and you want to check exactly how accurate this map is by running a model over some imagery, you can collect data and Collect Earth and assess the accuracy of your map, because of course let's say the data collected by an interpreter is supposed to be the right data, no, like the ground truth. So the collector data becomes the ground truth of the map. And anyway, there are lots of uses. There's even people using Collect Earth for collecting data on the status of archaeological sites in Syria. So it's any kind of use, anything you can do by collecting data with very high resolution imagery, you can do in Collect Earth, because as I say, this form is the user can customize it. Okay. Anyway, but this is related to greenhouse gas inventories and activity data. Here, this is the IPCC land representation that we are usually presenting to the countries, which of course you have seen many times, I guess. So in Collect Earth, we try to reproduce this. All right. So when the user clicks on a plot, and so we have the forest. So the type of actually our approach in Collect Earth is to go backwards in time. So we ask the user to collect first what is the current land use of the plot. Okay, if they can identify the current land use of the plots. And then we ask the user, go through all this process of looking at the time series of the Google Earth Pro, look at the imagery from Google Earth app, look at the planet imagery, look at all the imagery available, and try to understand if there has been a change on land use. And if there has been a change of land use, then tell us what year that happened. And then give us also your assessment of what was the land use subdivision. All right, because we are interested on getting the whole time series of what is the current subdivision. So if it's a cropland, okay, palm oil plantation, and this is currently 2022 a palm oil plantation, but in 2018 it was I don't know, a wet evergreen forest, right? So then we can apply the change on the land use from that year. We had the possibility, I'm sorry, because I don't have it here. Maybe you can see in this one. Let's see. So after we go to the second kind of card on the form, come on, do it, go. You see here that, okay, we can, for instance, characterize the type of land cover on the plot, right? And then we can characterize the land use of the plot. So we can say what type of land use you have currently. Well, this is 2020, but anyway, 2022. And then you can also mark the conversion and mark as well collect the subdivisions and the changes from the previous subdivision to the current subdivision. Okay, sorry, I should have prepared a little presentation on that. But yeah, at the end, the whole thing that we are doing here is going plot by plot, collecting the land use subdivisions, current land use subdivisions and previous land use subdivisions, so that we can go year by year producing a table, and in that table put exactly for each plot what is the land use subdivision and make an extrapolation of the data to the whole area of the country. So we use what we call an expansion factor. Okay. So let's say if you have, like in this example, a plot every 4 kilometers, and you collect data on that single plot, the data for that plot becomes the data for the full 4 by 4 kilometer grid. So this is called an expansion factor, okay? And it's just the common way that sample-based data works. Okay, so at the end you will have for each plot you will have an area estimation of what is the equivalent area of the plot. All right. Yes. So the idea is to then apply that to the whole time series, get a table, and that table used for the reporting on the FREL or on the greenhouse gas inventory. As I was saying, there are 3 types of activity methods to generate activity data. So the first one that was used at the beginning, like we started the whole process, for instance, in the red process to produce activity data. There was this push countries to use wall-to-wall, all right, which was a little bit problematic because in wall-to-wall there is you cannot correct the systematic error, and you cannot either calculate the confidence intervals on the data that you produce on land use and land use change, especially land use change. And then in the last years, we have moved more to the collect earth method. So more and more countries are using the collect earth method, which of sample-based estimation. And there are two options there: the stratified area estimate and the samples only estimate. The stratified area is kind of a mix with maps and sampling, because you use previous maps that you have generated with wall-to-wall to generate a stratified. Basically, it's a way to collect less data, because then you focus your data collection in areas where you think that there has been change, rather in areas that you don't think there was change, or the map doesn't show there was change. While the samples only, which actually is what we use collect earth most, at least in my group, is when you just have a systematic sample or a random sample all over the country, and you just collect data over this systematic sample. And that way you also avoid bias on the wall-to-wall map, right? Because if you have a wall-to-wall deforestation map that is completely biased, if you use a stratified area estimate, you are also going to have, let's say, biased data. So anyway, there are different, let's say, approaches, but it's pretty similar anyway. The stratified area estimate and the samples only approach. Yes, again, I should have updated this, but this is just a list of countries where they have used collect earth for the forest reference emission level, which is part of the reporting for the UNFCCC for the REDD+ mechanism. All right, so yes, many countries, and I guess I haven't really seen the list of participants here where you guys coming from, but I'm guessing that some of your countries where you come from are using collect earth already, mainly the forestry departments, which are the ones that usually collect the data for the FRELs. All right. Demo time. No, not demo time. We don't have time for the demo time. It's a pity, because actually collect earth is quite entertaining to use. Anyway, yes, I have collect earth. This is our architecture that you can leave you this this here for where you want to review. Most important thing is that it's free and open source, so anyone can review the code. If you want to review the code, we have some countries that actually review the code, which is always impressive. And how does it work in collect earth? Well, this is a workflow for preparing a collect earth data assessment. So first of all, you need to, understand what data you want to collect. Okay. So we have a product called Open Forest Collect. It's a little bit, we didn't really do the naming very well on these products because they are really confusing. Because we have Collect and Collect Earth are two different tools. Okay. And then you have Collect Earth and Google Earth that are also two different tools. But in Collect, you can use something called the Survey Designer to produce a survey. We have some templates that you can use, so you don't have to start from scratch. But again, you can create any type of survey you want. So first of all, you need to know what data you want to collect. Then the second step is to create the sample. So what kind of grid you want to generate? You want to generate a stratified sample, or you want to generate a random sample, or a systematic sample, or you can even have, if you are monitoring specific projects, you can just use your own polygons of those projects. Let's say that you have a list of forest plantations and you have like a shapefile with the boundaries of the plantations. You can also use the collect earth to monitor specific forest plantations, because we are kind of agnostic. So like, we don't care. It's up to you what you collect. We don't force you to do anything. You decide what you do. All right. So once you have someone has done these two steps, prepare a survey, prepare the sampling, so where you are going to collect this data. Then you have the third step, which is the heavy one, which is the data collection. So you see, this first step, you can have one person doing it. But for the next step, which is the data collection part, usually be a few people, because we are speaking about thousands of plots. So you have to have a team. You have to build a team that you have to train. You have to train them quite well, because it's very important that the data is collected, in the same way by everyone. You cannot have different people assessing the same imagery in different ways. So if something is, I don't know, a rice paddy, everyone in your team should know that that's a rice paddy. No, so there should be like some kind of course of training of the interpreters and the user or the main user that is handling this data collection activity. Very importantly, should produce some type of guidelines, with examples, with images, like this is what we think is, or no, this is what is this type of forest. And not only to have the images of that type of forest, but to have examples of how the vegetation indexes behave in that forest, right? So you can use those examples as a guideline for the interpreters, right? Or you have like to have very well trained interpreters. Okay, so we have then this is the step where collect Earth kicks in. In collect Earth, we are collecting the data. As I say always, collect Earth and Google Earth Pro are working together, right? And the data that each user is collecting ends up on a database inside collect Earth. So this is a common question in many countries, like, oh, where is this data? This data is in some kind of Google Cloud service. It's not. The data of collect Earth remains on the interpreter computer. So each computer that is running collect Earth has a very small database, and in that very small database, you collect the data. Then what you need to do is to put together all this database on a single one. So if you are collecting data on a whole country, you will have an interpreter that collects data just on a province or a district or however you want to do it. And at the end of the data collection, you should aggregate this data together, which is the last step, which is data aggregation and analysis. Basically, as I say, you collect the data of all the operators, you clean the data of all these operators just to make sure that everything is fine, no one has made any mistakes. We have methodologies for data cleaning and data correction, all right? In case you find like an interpreter that has done some kind of systematic error, that happens sometimes, that sometimes someone doesn't really get the idea of how things are done very well and systematically collects the wrong type of subdivision or the wrong type of change, and you need to change that, okay? Because this is the error that you can have. I mean, in collect Earth, the data is basically the main error is the operator error, all right? So depending on the type of operators that are collecting the data or interpreters, you're going to have good data or bad data. So this is why it's important to have a very good team and to have a team that you train well to understand how collect Earth is used. Usually, we're speaking about what we usually do in our team is to have 1 week training, right? Where we do a couple of days is just like general training on the tool, how it works, how to understand all these colors that I showed you before, the colors on the blue, sorry, the green and the orange and the red, and what are those colors for the Landsat and Sentinel imagery, how to use Google Earth, how to use collect Earth, how to export data, how to import data, and all these things. And then we go after the third day, we do like a 3-day data collection tool specifically on the area we are collecting data, and to generate also this kind of methodology and guidelines. And then finally, when you have all this data, you put it together and you collect and you analyze it. We have a tool in collect Earth, it's called Saiku, which is this one, which is a business intelligence tool. All right, so you can do all the data analysis within Saiku. It's actually pretty nice and pretty fast, but it's a bit like Excel pivot tables, but better. Well, not better, but easier for the user, because you basically just have like a much easier interface to use, and anyone can use it very fast. Otherwise, if you don't want to use Saiku, you could just export the data to CSV, which CSV is like a comma separated value format that you can just open in Excel like a normal Excel sheet, and then manipulate the data. And at the end, as I say, what you are going to have, if you could use the service that for instance, we are using for the countries we work in, is a table which for each plot, what is the area equivalent of the plot, is plot expansion factor. And you can see year by year what is the land use of that plot. So this year from 2000, 2001, 2003, 2000, blah, 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 until 2017, this plot was forest of type, I don't know, wet evergreen forest. And then from 2018 to 2022,
You're muted, Sakai.
You're muted.
Okay.
You're muted.
Yes, I have just one small question on the last slide on the integration with the Ipcc inventory software. Does it mean that it will now have an import function where you could actually import the area and area change data, and then it will generate a land use metrics? Because those are the discussions that they were talking about when I moved from the Ipcc. Okay, that's very good then.
Yeah. So we started. We just signed the MOU, the LOA. It took like for a very long time, but now it's signed, and now I'm starting to work with it. Like already, I should have started last week, but I will start this week. And basically the data, it will be just directly generating an XML file, and this XML file will be imported inside the Ipcc inventory software.
For all the land use and land use change categories.
For everything, yes.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I think Marcelo and I think John. Sorry, I'm not sure who came first.
Sorry, I won't say yes.
Go ahead,
Marcelo.
John.
Or John.
Whoever came first, sorry. Yes.
Okay. Alfonso, thank you for your detailed and technically impressive work on this. Can I just ask on behalf of the participants, what you showed was an approach, a way that they could use to track land use change and also to work out land use. Are there any pre-prepared data sets by country, or have you demonstrated how they could do this for themselves? So I just wanted to just clarify that particular point.
Yes,
Thanks.
my team is terrible at producing guidance. So basically, the guidance is produced by the countries themselves. We have most of the forest reference emission levels that use collect earth, and they describe the methodology themselves in the forest reference emission level. We do have as well like the templates, let's say like the survey, the survey templates for the countries to do it this themselves. Of course, these are generic, so the country will need to actually change the survey to adapt the land use subdivisions, because as you see in the Ipcc land use representation, you have the subdivisions are by country, right? While the categories are generic. So the countries need to, or whoever uses collectors need to customize this. But yeah, we do have this kind of approaches already prepared. Again, the best thing, and I know it's not very nice, but the best thing is to totally go through the FREL, the forest reference emission levels by country, and all of them actually have the section on the activity data methods, right? And they kind of present it quite well there. So yes, this is actually a big shortcoming in my team, that we have not done this properly.
Okay,
so,
thank you, Alfonso.
But one thing, in Africa, in Africa we will have let's say a pre-produced data set called the Africa Open Deal, where we have collected 500,000 plots. All right. The rest of the world, we still don't have any data that we can just give to people, because this is a country or institution-led kind of approach. But we would love if institutions that collect data will share it openly. But sadly, this is not really happening in usual. So the only thing we have is for Africa, the Africa Open Deal that we are releasing now in May.
Okay, thank you, Alfonso. I think Marcelo has got the next one.
Thank you, Alfonso. Well, just to maybe incentivize the participant to make questions, I want to also to make a question to you. Thanks for the presentation. Very, very important and interesting tool that we have available. You have mentioned a very important aspect, that is the knowledge that people have to order to collect and to assess the image that they are seeing. So maybe to give a little bit more insight to the participants, Alfonso, can you pick up one example of the Asia region that you have been involved, to tell them a lot about how much time it took for them to come with this assessment, just people to have an idea of how much effort we are talking about. Thank you.
Yeah, it depends very much. For instance, we have Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea collected with support also from, I think it was from JICA. They collected something like 27,000 plots. We usually say, depending on the type of forest and the complexity of the forest, right? Depending on this complexity, you can collect something between 75 to 200 plots. So if you have very homogeneous forests, like for instance, we have done this in Norway. In Norway, they were collecting 300. Each operator was collecting 300 plots per day, because basically all the forest in Norway is the same. It doesn't really change. It's all plantations, or not plantations, but like coniferous kind of plantations. And while you do the same thing in a Central American country where there is a lot of change, or in some African countries where you have a lot of smallholder agriculture, a lot of changes within crops, and crops to secondary forests, and secondary forests to crops, and then to secondary forest again. I mean, that complicates things a lot. So depends on the complexity of the land use changes, it can take longer, right? Again, you do need to train your users very well. In Mongolia, for instance, Mongolia is a country that they did a super assessment with collect earth. I think they collected something like, I think it was 120,000 plots or 150,000 plots. There it took a long time, because it was like 2 people collecting data. So there's a lot of data to collect. I even told them, maybe that you overdid it a little bit there. But it's all about how do you say, you can calculate these statistics quite fast. So you can do first a test in a province. If you are collecting data with Collect Earth, basically what we tell, test in a province, see how that goes in that province, and according to how you do in that province or that area or that region, whatever you choose, then make an extrapolation for the whole country. So if you were able to collect 100 plots a day, then okay, think you have 20 interpreters, you are collecting 100 plots a day, how much resources do you have? You have resources for 10 days, so just basically calculate how many plots more or less you will be able to collect. Because the data will be good, the however plots you will collect, but the uncertainties will be lower the more plots you collect, right? So it's you had to balance there the uncertainties and the time and resources you have. This.
Thank you, Alphonse. I think there's another question from Monjun on how many people are involved to collect activity data for one country and how long does it take to get a final result of activity data?
So this is the same thing I said before. Yeah, usually, like let's take that you need a week to train the people. Then after that, we usually do what we call a mapathon, and we do have guidance in mapathons. Actually, the World Resources Institute produced a guide on how to do a mapathon in Collect Earth. I can find it later and send it to you. So we produce what we do what we call a mapathon, which is very important for the interpreters to be focused on this, because if you're not focused on this can be very tedious after like 4 days, and then you start receiving emails or meeting invitations or whatever, and then you don't collect the data. So what we produce is these mapathons, or what we promote is these mapathons where you put 10 people together for a week or for 10 days, for 2 weeks of work, and you just do that data collection, and you just block your time just to do that data collection. I think that's super important. If you tell people, go to the office, collect the data, a couple of hours there, a couple of hours the next day, at the end we have a problem that people, like interpreters, cannot get a bit lost on this because it's a lot of plots. So you need to block these calendars for 2 weeks, just collect the data, and then calculate how many people you have, how many days you can block their calendars, and then from that more or less produce your sample design. So it's not mega scientific, it's more on the practical side, or like how much money you have, how much time you have. That's up to you.
Yeah, maybe just a quick follow-up question in relation to what John asked. You had a slide that was showing the workflow presentations. Yes. The workflow for the years. Do your tutorials that you have on each of those stages in terms of data processing, are they in a manual format maybe to support the countries, or is just in the videos to support the countries to understand how to process the remote sensing data so that they can use it?
So they are mainly in the videos. We do have some manuals as well there in the tutorial section of the website, but I think it's mostly the videos. I think that is the best resources. And I think it's pretty doable because right now I know we do collect data in Collect Earth, like how many people are downloading Collect Earth and how many people start. When you start the application of Collect Earth, it says, okay, someone is working with Collect Earth in I don't know, somewhere. So we know that there is someone using it. And we have lots of people using it right now, collecting data. I don't know any of these people. So like they are supposed to be able to do it all by themselves. So I guess it's pretty doable.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you. I don't see any more questions here in the chat.
Sekai, there was a hand up in I think was Paolo, but now the hand is not here anymore. But anyway, Paolo had his hand up. I don't know if he wants to take the floor.
Okay, sure. Paolo?
Just if we have time, really. Hello, everyone. A colleague of Alfonso. We work on transparency issues, so literally on GAG inventory and support countries in strengthening the capacity. So I want to stress here for the whole audience on the importance of this tool. This is a major breakthrough tool for countries to actually start collecting data. We keep encountering countries which have zero data on land use, zero maps, very old data on forests, unknown situation on the ground because of lack of funding, because of disorganization, etc. So this is a major tool for the country, and it's very useful and easy to use. But I want to play the devil's advocate role here right now with my comment. Let's say I'm a country, I'm concerned about, the consistency of satellite imagery available for every single plot. As I move from one plot to another, I may have another date available in terms of satellite imagery. So how do you deal with that? Thank you.
So it's true that this is what I was showing in the first slides about Google Earth, that we have the very high resolution imageries, and that will depend on Google's goodwill of having, I mean, this is something they pay themselves, they give for free. Depending on the area, they have more or less very high resolution imagery. Of course, next to populated areas, there is way more if you go too close to a city. If you go in the middle of the forest in DRC, you have likely you have 2 or 3. So in that very high resolution imagery side, we are depending on what it is in Google Earth Pro, right? But the reason why we have this Google Earth Engine app with the connection to the Sentinel and the Landsat, which is the NASA and the European Space Agency programs for Earth observation, we do have access to their images. And as I said, with a latency of around 2 to 3 days. So for instance, is what we are using right now to monitor Ukraine, right? We can see the bombings in Mariupol with 2 days of delay from these images captured by the European Space Agency Sentinel-2 imagery. So on the changes at large scale with the Sentinel-2 imagery, you can go up to last week. If you wanted to do a collection on 2022, you could do it because there is data everywhere in the world up to last week. Of course, then you have, depending on the cloud cover, no? But maybe you don't have images for March, but you have for February, right? Because maybe in March you always had cloud cover, while in February you didn't have cloud cover. But let's say that we have access to very recent imagery. Again, this presents an issue when we're speaking about degradation. Okay, degradation is small changes that are maybe difficult depending on what you classify as degradation. This could be very difficult to capture, right? Because degradation, you are saying that degradation is just like selective cutting on the forest. To see that on Sentinel-2 imageries, which is Sentinel-2 imagery, which is 10 meters, can be very difficult, right? But if we're speaking about clear cutting or changes of crop types or things that really make a difference, then you can use this Sentinel imagery and access anything up to right now almost.
Okay, thank you, Alfonso. I see Marcelo's hand is up. Okay,
yes,
we need to move on to the next presentation.
No, I know, Sekai, but I think this is a very important point. I want to stress something that we have been discussed all these days. I think the perfect is enemy of the good. And I think now that countries, particularly developing country parties, will have to move to produce a national greenhouse gas inventory every 2 years under the Paris Agreement, it's critical that they start to use, for example, Collect Earth. And at the end of the day, they don't have to be perfect. I mean, they have to use what they have available. And for the purpose of greenhouse gas inventories, we want to track the land use and the land use change. So Sentinel or even Landsat images will be sufficient. Of course, if you want to also estimate emissions in forest land, remaining forest land, degradation could be important. Therefore, you need to go a little bit deeper. But you don't have to start with everything. So I want just to stress that just start, and maybe your first inventory will not be that good, but doesn't matter. The important thing is to start, and you're going to improve over time, and you're going to have better quality images in the future, more available information in the future. But please just start, because otherwise you will have difficulties to do the things if you don't start working. Thank you.
And thank you, Marcelo. Just a quick question: does the FAO have training workshop on the Collect Earth tool? I know I've seen the tutorials and the videos, but do you actually hold specific training sessions on the Collect Earth tool, just to support countries?
We support any country. So basically, we have 23 countries in my project. I know we have other projects that have the same kind of goals, similar goals to our project. They support many other countries. So whoever wants support in Collector, they just need to write an email.
Okay, thank you. I think that's good for the participants to know. Thank you, Marcelo. And I know that we have like a 5-minute break. Can I limit that to 2 minutes? And then we, or is that too much? Can I just limit to 2 minutes break and then we move on to the presentation from Iranis? Just 2 minutes.
5 minutes. 2 minutes is not a break.
It's too much. Okay, 5 minutes. That's fine. We have 5 minutes.
5 minutes. I think it's fine.
Okay. Okay.
We will be efficient with the time. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Please come back in
So
5 minutes.
take a 5-minute break and then we come back.
The time with my presentation. I promise I will be faster.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Okay. Okay, is that all right? 5 minutes. I can see we have more people. We've got 37 now, so I think we have people that are joining again.
We can start now, Sakai.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so we're gonna have the next presentation on the logic tool, which is a tool used for developing land representation information for greenhouse gas estimates from Jordanis from FAO. So Jordanis, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Sakai. Good day to everyone. Share my screen. I think you are able now to see my screen, right?
No,
We see your screen here,
but...
Adonis, but you're quite quiet.
Yes, okay.
Your voice is low.
Now you can hear me better, maybe?
A bit better, thank you.
I'll try to speak louder.
Thank you.
Good day, everyone. My name is Jordanis Zamzis. I'm working at FAO in the NDC Enhancement Support Team. Following up to the previous presentation, I would just like to reiterate something that Alfonso said and something that I also indicated in our previous days, that it is Collect Earth, of course, is a super helpful and useful tool, but we need to have in mind that these tools, all the tools, basically, and the one that I'm going to present next, are tools to help us. So we really do need to understand how the tools work. Alfonso noted that it is important to avoid any classification errors and to reduce the uncertainties when using Collect Earth and all the tools. So from my experience also, I have found that several countries are using Collect Earth with different approaches, and this may result in different results. It is really needed for the countries when using Collect Earth to establish a protocol, a specific protocol, in order for the whole team to know and to follow the same protocol. I will post in the chat later after my presentation a publication in relation to a specific protocol that you may also consider when you apply Collect Earth for land use classification. Now, in my presentation, I will present the logic tool that we are working right now at FAO. This logic tool basically builds upon the Collect Earth results, outputs, in order to prepare the land representation for the GHG inventory purposes in the LULUCF sector. So we will see in more detail the logic tool. In general, in an overview, the logic tool, what is doing is the analysis of the land area information as obtained by the Collect Earth or other tools. We will speak about that later. In order to produce all the outputs we need, as we saw also in yesterday's presentations for the land representation. Right now, we are at version 1.2. It is a beta version right now. The logic tool is an Excel-based and very easy to use tool, dynamic tool, which features a step-by-step approach in order to guide the users from the upload of input information for the logic tool up until the output results. It utilizes country information as input data, which have been obtained by the use of Collect Earth tool or other software applying similar approach. And this is very important that we are talking about any approach that applies classification, land use classification based on sampling at the plot level, because as Alfonso as Alfonso showed, the collect Earth does the classification plot by plot. So we are collecting with collect Earth the information in each plot of our area of interest. The logic tool can facilitate any county-specific land use stratification scheme, and one of the main challenges that countries face, and we do know that, is the information and the availability of data for longer time series, especially for previous years. That's why we have built-in functionality in the logic tool that assists and prepares also backcasting and forecasting and gap filling. I will speak briefly on this in my next slides in order to ensure the consistent time series. Of course, for this, certain requirements should be met. The outputs of the logic tool are all the necessary information for the GHG inventory in the LULUCF sector and for reporting in the CRTs as adopted in Glasgow. Basically, the main outputs are the annual area analysis that we need, the 20 years area analysis, and the land use conversion matrices. The tool utilizes country information, as I said, to develop the land representation. Certain rules should be met in terms of the input data that we are inserting in the tool. And the users must ensure that the content of the input file respect these requirements, and these requirements refer to both the format and the content of our input file. We will see examples of input data and these requirements in order to be more easily understandable. It is an Excel-based tool, therefore the input file should be also in an Excel format. Now we are getting into the input data requirements and limitations. As we saw, the collector tool can export all the information that we collect from the application of the collector in the CSV format, and then very easily we can transform this CSV in Excel. It has been designed to work with input data, as I said, with collectors and other tools that the country may use in order to do a sampling approach for land use classification. And of course, the input file for the logic tool now should contain the information on land use for all plots for all available years for the area of interest. By the way, the snapshot that I have on the right side of the slide is just an example of an input file. We will see a zoom-in version in the next slide. So one of the requirements is that the starting year of our GHG inventory period should be no later than 2005, and the number of years for which the land use information is available at the plot level, of course, should not be less than 16 years. Keep in mind that having per plot land use information for 6 years give us information for land use changes for 15 years. So we need the 16 years time series of land use classification per plot in order also to have in turn land use change information for 15 years. And an example is that if we have, for example, the 2000 as a starting year, the input file needs to contain land use information until 2015. Here we can see an example of an input file, and some I have indicated in red also the minimum requirements. You can see that the input file should have in this specific structure order and with the specific headings with no black columns in between. The first 6 columns are mandatory. In the first on the table on the right, you can see the explanation per each column. For example, column A is the plot ID, that we need to have the plot ID. The collector automatically assigns a plot ID in each of the plot, but in any case, if the user uses any other software to assign a plot ID, is nothing so difficult. You simply assign, for example, an indicator, a number, a sequential numbering. Then we have the region, the soil, the ecological zone, and climate zone. We saw for the 3 biophysical parameters yesterday data sets that you can use. or if you have a national and country-specific information, of course, you can use these ones. For the region, it's country-specific information that you can apply. And then the next column, column F, is the area. We saw how you can assign an area to a plot. Basically, the plot always represents an area based on the sampling approach that you are following. And then the following columns are the years and the plot classification for each of these years. Important point here is that, of course, all the columns should have the same length, meaning that the cells should be completed up until the longer column in terms of the size. And then the other important thing is that the Excel sheet name that contains all our information should be named as a plot list with capital letters, as you see it in the image. As I said, the logic tool can work with any country-specific nomenclature for plot classification, as we see here. And another requirement is that the separation between the main land use category and the land use subcategory in this version of the tool should be mandatorily be done by using the dash without leaving a space between. In this example, in this case, for example, what you are seeing before the dash is the main land use category with the coding by the country, and after the dash is the land use subcategory. The logic tool now going to the functionalities applies this version applies an approach 2 for land representation, and also the 20 years Ipcc default transition period. We spoke about those two yesterday. It provides for gap filling, backcasting, and forecasting. And all three functionalities are implemented automatically by the tool, meaning that the user does not have to do anything else by just pressing the button in the specific step that we will see later on. And of course, all three functionalities refer only to the information regarding the plot land use classification. Now, what is the gap filling? The gap filling is when the input file contains information, to put it better, when it has gaps in the input information, but respecting the 16 years rule, as I said before, then the tool automatically fills in the missing year. For example, if we have in the previous example, if the user has inserted an input file within plot information from 2000 to 2015, and then the next column is for 2017, the tool automatically fills in 2016 year with information extracted being equal, copying basically from the latest year, which is in this case 2015. In that way, we have as a first step a full complete time series of land use classification of land use information for the plot. The backcasting is always done for 20 years back from the starting year. So if the starting year, as we saw in this example, is 2000, the backcasting is done back to 1980. And this is very important for countries because many countries do have lack of information for past years. And this is done in order to, as I explained yesterday in my presentation, in order to have all the information necessary, at least using the Ipcc default period of 20 years, in order to estimate accurately the emissions and removals in our starting year or base year. How is done the backcasting? It is implementing a random and iterative approach, plot by plot and year by year, starting from the closest, of course, year to the starting year. And it is taking into account all the types and frequency of the land use status of the plots as observed by the input file, meaning that in order to do the backcasting, the tool just make an analysis of the input information inserted in the tool, which is basically the information, theoretically, the real information that the user has. So that's why we need the longer time series. That's the reason for having the requirement of 15 years of land use changes in order to be our backcasting to be more robust. This, as I said, it uses an iterative approach, so the tool automatically does this randomly. In this beta version, this fixed number is set to 0 because we are at the beta version. This number will increase substantially in the final version. And once we have this information for all the iteration, then the tool estimates the average area annual analysis from all the iteration. In that way, we get from these iterations the average information of land use changes. And the forecasting is made similar to the backcasting, with the difference, of course, that we are starting from the year closest to the last year of the input file going forward. And another important difference is that the forecasting is made only either for until the current year -2, because we need to have information for the GG inventory purposes 2 years previous to the current year, or 5 years from forward to the last year of the inventory period of the input file, whichever is lower. And this is done in order to incentivize, to mobilize the countries to always make the new iteration of actual data collection. So these are the two differences. Always the backcasting is for 20 years. On the other hand, the forecasting is done either for 5 years or until the year, which is the current year -2. In any case, the forecasting cannot be more than 5 years. This is the interface of the logic tool. We can see I have here a screenshot with some numberings that links also to the characteristics. In this left part, we have the main tools containing the different functionalities. Then we have the main tabs that basically this is what the user should click on in order to work with the tool. In this side of the tool, we have the windows where we can see some information obtained from the analysis of the input data. Then we have the windows where we are doing the mapping, because right now in the example we saw there was a country-specific coding of land uses. So the tool needs to understand what each of these code means in terms of Ipcc land use categories. And then we have the step progress bar and the overall process progress bar, and some counters just for information purposes. And at the end, we have a window when we get some notifications. The user starts from step 1 and it continues with the rest of the steps. In order to start with a new step mandatorily, the tool has firstly to complete the previous step. Otherwise, you are not able to move to the next step. And here I have also put a table where it gives more information on what each step means in terms of the actions taken. In the first step is where the user inputs the data. So we have in this step the inserting of input data of the input file with our data. There are some necessary automatic control checks based on the minimum requirements that we talked about. And if there is the need, there is also in this step is happening the gap filling. In the second step, we have the analysis, the complete analysis and control check of the input data and its structure. And then we have, it's the only step where the user needs to take an additional action. And this is where the user basically maps the counter-specific codes with the Ipcc default land use categories. Then in step 3, we have the development of the annual area analysis after the application of any backcasting and forecasting. In step 4, the tool creates the 20 years analysis data, and at the last step, in step 5, we have the construction of the land use conversion matrices. The tool is very, very easy. You need to click on the button on the button for step 1 and simply to browse in your computer to input the file. It is needless to say that you have already prepared your Excel file, as we saw in the beginning, based on the requirements. And then once the input file is inserted, the tool makes automatically all the analysis that it needs to do. And just the user has to wait until the progress bar gets to 100%. And then you have also the coloring from orange to green in order to indicate when the step is completed. So once we get 100% for the progress and the green, the button has turned to green, we can move to the second step. The second step is, again, the tool is making the complete analysis as we saw previously, and makes all the analysis and the control checks. And then here we need to do something more, which is basically the mapping of the land use categories. In order to do this, the user has to click in each of the country-specific codes, and then to go in this second window to double click on the Ipcc land use categories. And this is how the mapping is done. In order to undo a mapping, it's very easy. You only need to go back to this window and to unclick. It's nothing difficult. And once the mapping has been done, the user has to press the confirm button. It's a second step, let's say, of quality control in order to give the user the opportunity, if they made any mistake, to undo. In this specific example, let's say that the mapping is like that. TC means cropland, P means grassland, AT means other land, TF means forest land, E is the settlement, and TH is the wetland. Once we have the mapping done, then all the rest of the steps are automatic. Here you can see also that the analysis in step 2 has been completed. Here the window presents us all the information based on the input file, and this is where the user can cross-check, for example, whether the number of plots are indeed 500 as expected, the first year, the last year of the input file. In these other tabs, you can see also the analysis made in the input file in terms of the regions or the climate zones and soil zones that have been obtained from the input file. In step 3, which is the step where the annual area analysis for land representation is developed, everything is automatic. What we have to do is just to wait for the tool to complete all the actions. The progress bar gets to 100, and then step 3 button gets to green, and then we can move with step 4. The same with step 4. Automatically, the tool creates the 20 years area analysis, and the last step is the step where the land use conversion matrices are developed. This is also automatically done, and nothing additional is required from the user. And once the process is completed, the output file is exported. The output file is, of course, there are some other buttons where you can find more information on resources or on how to use. There is also the manual here on how to use the tool. And once we have our output file, the output file basically is an Excel file where the user can see all the information. It can copy paste all the information there in the output file. You can see all the formulas are visible of which formulas are used in order for the user to test, to cross-check. And of course, if you have any comment, all of these comments are very welcome. And you can use all this information to report in CRTs, and of course to use them for the GHG inventory. Now I will very quickly go to the output files. We have, as an output file, always we start with the input file, the original input file, as inserted by the user. The second file is the annual area analysis. So based on all the subcategorization that used the user, the tool automatically creates this annual area analysis file. It covers all the GHG inventory period plus the backcasted years. Here we are talking about land use changes occurring on an annual basis. Okay, so here you can see the whole time series. You can see the land use category this in light yellow, let's say, is under forest land. All the subcategories of forest land converted to this TFAC land use category, which is again forest land. And with the orange, we see the land use, the forest land use subcategory remaining in the same forest land use subcategory. This is a huge list in this case of table, so this is just a screenshot. The next table is the total annual area per each land use subcategory. Here in this example, we can see all the forest land subcategories, all the cropland subcategories, the grassland subcategories, etc. Here in this case, for example, we don't have any subcategory for wetland, settlement, and other land, and the total area of the country. This table, the information from this table can be used. I have also indicated in which CRT tables can be used this information to report in. The next one is the 20 years area analysis. Here we have, based on the 20 years conversion period, transition period, we have the cumulative areas applying the Ipcc default period. It covers the whole the GHG inventory period, and this information can be used to report in the background tables, basically in CRT 4A to 4F. Again, we can see the main land use category here, which is forest land. We can see the forest land remaining forest land. Then we can see the forest land subcategory remaining in the forest land subcategory. All the transitions of other forest lands converted to this subcategory. And similarly goes with the other categories. Then we have the land converted to forest land, all the possible combinations of transitions either from cropland, grassland, wetland, settlement to forest land, and for all the land use categories is done the same. And finally, we have the last output file. Excel sheet basically is the land use conversion matrices. We have all the land use matrices for all the years, for the GHG inventory period and the backcasting years. Of course, for the CRTs, we need the land use matrices covering the GHG inventory period, but because it's a good practice to report the land use matrices, all the land use matrices used for the GHG inventory and those for backcasted years, the tool provides also the land use matrices back in this example to 9081, which the user can just copy paste them and report them in an annex to the inventory document. So yesterday we spoke about the land use matrices. We have the diagonal, of where we have the indication when we don't have any changes, and all the different possible potential, let's say, land use conversions between the land use subcategories as defined by the input file by the user. And I think this is the last slide. Yes, right now we are at the stage where we're collecting comments from expert review. Basically, this time period has been completed, but since we are here, if any one of you is interested to review the tool, to provide comments, you are very welcome to do so. We can ship it to you. The tool, it's Excel tool. It uses macros. So you can do so, but please, if you are interested, we will need to have your comments as soon as possible. The next step is to release the next version of the logic tool based on the comments received. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jordanis. That was very enlightening. I think it will also remove the need for using the Excel files, because it will do the gap filling and apply the 20-year transition period as well to the whole time series. I think that's quite big leap, I think, in this field in terms of gap filling. I don't know if my understanding is correct. That
yes,
this
but I'm going to say it again. These tools are helpful, but of course the gap filling is made based on what the user has provided to the tool. So if the tool has provided false data or incorrect data, the gap filling or the backcasting will be incorrect. This is why we need always to be very careful with the tools and to know every time what the tool is doing and the limitation of the tool. Of course, with all the other tools in terms of land use classification, it really matters what and how the land use classification has been done, either by the software or by the user.
Yeah. Do you think that is possible then to use, for example, those Excel files that we showed them earlier, and then gap fill again using the tool and compare if the numbers look more or less the same? I don't know. Again, as you say, it depends on input data as well.
Yeah, the gap filling in the logic tool is just a copy paste right now. We are thinking of using a more sophisticated approaches, but you understand that the gap filling we're talking about in the logic tool, in any case, it requires to have at least a minimum set of 15 years of land use changes in order to do the gap filling. So basically, I expect that when a country has indeed already 15 years, it's not going to be so difficult to do the gap filling by themselves. Yes. So we have the gap filling in case only there is a case that the user missed to have 1 year or 2 years. In any case, the approach is always that the best approach is always the tool not to need to do the gap filling, to have a complete time series from the country in order to avoid the tool itself to do the gap filling. But if the user needs to have for 1 year, yes, the tool will make the gap filling.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I think I see my John.
The message here is not to allow the tool to do the gap filling. I think I'm clear on this. We need the information from the country, and we take that the information from the country is the real information. So the tool starts from that basis.
Yes, okay, thank you. So then it means they still need to do the gap filling, I think, just to make sure that the input into the tool is more based on their national data. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yes, I think I've got John Watterson.
Yes.
Go ahead,
thank
John.
you very much, Iodanis, for your detailed presentation. I think Sakai may have answered my question, which is, if countries don't have 16 years of data, it's a lot of data. What should they do? And I think the answer, in part, is they use the techniques that Sakai showed to try and make a more complete time series, because I think it's quite a challenge for many countries to have such a long time series of data, and then obviously your tool needs that to then make a complete 20-year period. Thank you.
Yes, it is like that. Just to note that this tool is working at the plot level, so we need to have this information at the plot level firstly, and then it works with the area information. I do understand that. I do know that there are limitations in terms of data, but we saw, for example, the collector, Alfonso, if he's still with us, can confirm that in most of the countries, for example, they can go by using collectors to have data, annual data from 2000. I think there is available information. So it's just a matter of starting using the collectors. I do know that going back to 70s, it may be difficult. In some cases, there might be available information, but for collectors, Alfonso, if I'm not wrong, from 2000, the countries can start collecting data.
Yes, usually it's from 2000 that is the baseline for most countries, because this is, as I said before, is when we still having the Landsat imagery that allows us to reproduce the time series per plot. So it should not be a problem for the country, at least with the collector data. With other data, that maybe is more problematic.
So from 2000 onward, countries can obtain annual data, basically.
Okay, thank you. I see that Marcelo.
Yes, on this length of what is the data that you have to work, I think it's important to keep in mind that the full of IPCC is 20 years, but countries can use other time series or other years. And my guess is that developing country parts will have to try to work with shortened periods, even if they have through Landsat images the year 2000 as the starting point. I think going before 2000 may be a challenge to them if they want to apply the 20-year, the 4-year of the IPCC. So I think what I want here is to invite countries to think about it, if it's possible to work with shorter time periods and what will be the consequence of that. I don't know if Jordanis, if you have any thought on that, but I think it's something that we have to explore, because the first years of your time series, my way of thinking, it will be complicated, even if you start with 20,000.
Marcelo, just a clarification, are you talking about the conversion period or the data collected?
The conversion period, the 20 years.
Yeah. In any case, the logic tool, what it's doing is from the starting year, whatever this year is, of course, it cannot be later than 2005. It will create, based on this random and iterative process, the information for 20 years back. Now, if the country wants to use all these 20 years back or not, it's up to the country at the end to make the analysis. As per IPCC, usually the conversion period can be 20 years or more than 20 years. Now, if there is such a very country-specific case that 20 years is not applicable, of course, in this tool, it's not facilitated because it's a global tool, let's say, so it is not customized for one case. For next versions of the tool, we are thinking already to have this, let's say, possibility for the user to choose the country-specific period, but it's not for this first release. It will not be applied for this first release.
Let me just see if there are more questions in the chat. Yeah, I do not see any more questions in the chat. Yeah. Are there any more questions from the participants on this item? Yeah, I do not see any more, Jordanis, so I think it was very clear. Your presentation was very clear.
Thank you very much. I have just posted a publication that we have worked in the past on how to use the collector for land use classification, a protocol basically that countries may take into account when they are going to work with collector. So in case you have any question on this, also you can contact us.
Yes, okay. So I guess if there are no more questions for Jordanis, we could close the Q&A session and move on to the sort of summarizing the key takeaway messages from the workshop. Okay, I do not see any more questions there. Okay, perhaps I should start by saying I think today was quite maybe focusing on the more practical aspects of what to do when we're collecting data. This morning's session looked at the use of IPCC splicing techniques, and which we recognize, I think, after Jordanis' presentations, that we still need to have a good understanding of how to do the IPCC splicing techniques. In terms of following good practice guidance, we need to make sure that if we apply the IPCC splicing techniques, we follow the good practice guidance. First, we must look at the type of data that we have and then decide on which technique, gap filling technique, to apply on our data in order to do the gap filling. So I think that's still quite a critical message to take home. With regards to the Collect Earth tool, I think Alfonso's presentation was also very comprehensive, and I think we recognize that there are different manuals, I think, and also videos as well as tutorials on how to use the Collect Earth. And I think Jordanis has just sent a link on an old link, right, on the protocols of how to use the Collect Earth. So please do make use of those links and tools and tutorials just to support. And I understand as well from Alfonso that the FAO is open to countries who are willing to use the Collect Earth as a means of collecting their activity data in the land use sector, and they are willing to work and support countries. I think that's how I understood. And then please do intervene, Jordanis and Alfonso, if I have missed some very key points here with regards to the use and application of these tools. I think it's quite an exciting time in a way, because some countries have nothing, they have no data at all. And then how do you generate a land use matrix? So I think these tools have come in just at the right time to support countries in the implementation of the Paris Agreement, in particular the common tabular format. One of the tables, as you saw yesterday, is that countries need to have capacity to generate land use matrices. And I think these tools from FAO are very, very good. Of course, there are other options of doing it manually as well, which are also time consuming, but it's good to know that you have options in terms of resources that you can use. And also, I think Rosa mentioned yesterday the CBIT and Jeff, I think it's Jeff 8, they have a funding, I think, channel for capacity building, in particular for the implementation of the Paris Agreement and setting up national systems, in particular greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, the AFOLU sector is one of the sectors where I think that support is beginning to flow, I think, to some countries. I know that, for example, the FAO in Zimbabwe last week, I think from what Mirela was saying, to support countries in of course, conscientizing universities, institutions to help you with sort of some of this data processing. So again, the key point here is that institutional arrangements are also part of the process of setting up your national systems. So your institutional arrangements need to be formalized in such a way that you have data collection process, not just for the AFOLU sector, of course, but for all the inventory sectors in a much more systematic and structured way. I think we saw the example from South Korea yesterday about the different ministries and the roles and responsibilities being clearly allocated on which ministries collect data for LULUCF, which ministries collect data for agriculture, but also the need for better coordination in the way the data is collected. I think that's one thing that we picked up from that case study from South Korea. The logic tool, I think that was also, again, for me, I think this is, I don't know how others feel, but I think it would be good to also get views from the participants on how you think you'll be able to go home and apply some of these tools in your own day-to-day work. Logic tool, I think, is also a very good way, once it's finalized, of actually generating your matrices and, of course, taking into account the 20-year transition period, all the reporting requirements that are needed under the Paris Agreement, and the outputs, I think, from the logic pool follow the common tabular format, which I saw from the presentation from Johannes. So I think please do make use of the tools, and of course, I think ourselves, the Ricardo team, PATPA, Secretariat, they'll be available, as well as the FAO, for you to clarify any questions that you may have after the workshop. I think my understanding, Rosa, is that if they had any further questions or clarifications with regards to the material that was used within this workshop, they can follow up with them, with the Secretariat, or of course with the individual experts from the FAO team as well. If I was to do maybe a summary of, maybe is it possible to ask the participants as well on what they think the key takeaway messages are from this workshop, or how they think they will use the information that was shared during the workshop?
I think we have the evaluation that Jose, let me know when we should put in the screen the evaluation, so then we can collect these thoughts from the participants in the evaluation.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think if someone wants to take the floor and share what is for them is the key takeaway from these 3-day workshops, it would be great to hear from you. Yeah, please share with us. It's always interesting to get a feedback on the different topics covered, and whether any of those might be.
Auto wiper is off. Auto
Hello?
wiper is on.
Hello.
Hello, I think there's
Someone's please, if someone wants to
I
speak.
think maybe their microphone is on.
All right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no one wants to speak, but then maybe we can continue with the Mentimeter and the polling, and then at the end I will also share how we want to follow up on this workshop, of course. Yes.
So I hope you can see my screen. So once again, we want you to collect your views using the Mentimeter. So please go to menti.com. The code for the evaluation of today is 90859082. I trust this is also in the chat. Also the link that will go direct to the presentations or to the screen that the questions that you see in the screen. So we are asking here the concrete examples that you may apply to your work. So for example, you foresee to apply in Collect 2, you foresee to apply in the Logic 2. What do you wish to try, please? And maybe here you also, if you want to give a more specific feedback for Afonso in Yardonis on how you think you can apply these tools, or what kinds of support you want to receive, you can also use this question to include here your thoughts. The other question is training capacity development you will need. So here you can go over even more details of what the needs are. Then what we can improve in terms of the virtual workshop. And finally, what should be the next steps taken by PATPA in the second half of this year. So you can put your responses in any of these questions. I hope you are able to put in all the questions. Maybe if I want, maybe I try to push people to react. For sure, I see the need to use particular Collect tool, as I said, as soon as possible. Let's keep in mind that the first biannual transparency report is supposed to be presented by the end of 2024. And in this biannual transparency report, you're going to have your national inventory, and is a complete national inventory document. And within the land use sector, you are supposed to present the land use change matrix, or follow all the Ipcc 2006 guidelines. So I think in order to have this biannual transparency report ready by 2024, I believe countries have to work now, and particularly for collecting the data that they will need for the land use sector. So I think, again, Collect 2 is available and people should start to use as soon as they can. We are seeing some feedbacks already, so people are saying that they will apply the techniques to data gap filling, cross-check the tools with existing data set and calculation. I think this is a very good approach. Collect maybe use, but need to explore that tool with current use tool. Okay, yes, I think some countries are already using other tools, and maybe, I don't know, Afonso, if you want to react to this, how you foresee the interaction of collect tool with other tools, if there are concrete cases where countries have used different tools and combine them with collect tool, if there is something that you want to share.
Yeah, of course. I mean, collect Earth can be integrated with many other tools, especially if you have any other tools on the for instance, if you have your own imagery. You know, we have some countries where they have their own imagery that has been collected through other means. Okay, so we can use that. And when it comes to actually, many countries are doing the activity data reporting with the pixel counts, basically using maps, changing map change data, which has shown to have some problems. So there is some guidance there on how to move from pixel count to sample-based data. It's something that, for instance, Mexico has done. In Mexico, they started with that kind of approach of pixel count, of doing these maps of change, and it was problematic. So they moved to a sample-based. For instance, I think in Cambodia they have also started using pixel-based, and then they have also done sampling approach, which very different results. So let's say that the change of methodology is, as long as you are improving your methodology, you can change your methodology, and you can also integrate with other tools to improve the current methodology that you have. Yeah.
Thank you, Afonso. I was asked you to give any concrete example in Asia, so beyond Cambodia, there is any others that you can mention, because then participants can go and check direct with the country if they wish.
On the specific of integration with other tools, yeah, not really more than Cambodia, where we have in Papua New Guinea, for instance, they have created the whole national forest monitoring system with Collect Earth, and yes, basically they integrate with other mapping tools. Let's say the data is a bit agnostic in that you can integrate it with anything you would like to. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we see here also great opportunity to study new tools for creating land use matrix. Need to practice and apply to real case. That's for sure. I think it's the learning by doing. Okay, we don't have yet anything on training and capacity development. Also input for enhance the virtual workshop, or also anything yet for the next work of PATPA. But please use the Mentimeter to put these responses as soon as you can. Hosea, you want to also to go now to other forms of evaluation?
Yeah, maybe Aaron can do the polling now. Oh, Paulo.
Sorry, there's a hand from Paulo.
Sorry, I didn't see.
No, it just came up. Yeah, it's okay.
Thank you. So go ahead.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to intervene here. I think what is clear from these 3 days is that there are a lot of tools, as Yordanis and others have said, available to the countries, and the FO is certainly in a position to offer assistance to countries to, address more specific technical questions and deliver even trainings on these tools. But we as a transparency team are gathering a lot of experience on assisting countries. And I want to stress Sekai's words earlier on during the closing. That is, it is essential that the countries put in place an organization of the work in a way that these trainings and these assistance is more durable, more sustainable in the future. So I guess one of the key objectives. I'm following the Francophone cluster of PATPA, but I'm intervening here as a listener. But I think one of the purposes of PATPA is really to pulling together the experiences of countries and work together with them to finally set up institutional arrangements in a way that any further assistance in the future is effective, efficient, and, as I said, sustainable. 2024, the end of 2024 is round the corner. There's really little time to do the technical stuff, let alone to get organized for having that work done and delivered to the UNFCCC Secretariat. So I want to make the point and encourage any country who's listening and participating in these workshops to propose any activities to the PATPA and the other partners in the organization towards working in this direction. This is absolutely essential. Without an organization at the country level, a clear structure of who's doing what, with a clear picture of the funds available and the commitment at political level, you end up having a bunch of tools of no use, because maybe you're going to change your job position in the future, maybe your colleagues will change, there's no handover of the information or the experience. So the foundation of all this, of all the reporting to the UNFCCC and other reportings, of course, is getting a proper organization in place with the available funding. There's a lot of funding from international donors. We ourselves are trying, as FAO and other partners, are trying to coordinate ourselves better in order to avoid duplication of efforts, having maybe one training thing in 2022 and having to repeat the same training in 2023 because people change and there's no organization in that country. So yet again, I encourage any country to put forward their propositions through Menti, through emails. You have all our contacts, and to be proactive, not passive in this process. This is absolutely essential. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I fully endorse what you are saying, and we see here now that some people are also asking for more practical activities. So I think we can plan, Rosia, for the next steps to have this, and I hope this will be in person, because I think the level of detail that we need to talk or to engage in the discussions is a little bit more difficult if you have to do it virtually. So if we can plan next activities and focus on more practical examples and the concrete use of those tools with concrete and real data from the countries, I think is something that it will benefit everybody. And we see here in the Menti also some requests in these lines. So, okay, I will stop now the presentation, and then Aaron will follow up with another exercise for us to evaluate how we should do next things. Thank you.
Marcelo, just maybe before Aaron takes the floor, there's another question from, from John on a key question. How can institutional memory be preserved?
No question. It's just I put in the chat some thoughts for the participants and a link to a document that they might find useful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, thank you, John. Yeah.
So for those that don't see a small window popping up with the evaluation, you can also find it in the chat, and then please evaluate today's session. Thanks.
We see some answers are coming. I think they're similar to yesterday, which is also good. Having some constancy. Yeah, and happy to see that the majority or many, still find it very useful or found it very useful, and others, still learned some aspects from this today's workshop. Please, continue sharing with us what you think of it. And then maybe I can go directly to closing since we are behind time. But I think we made a good use of this time to cover very important topics, questions, and this is why we got together. So we have enough time for discussion. And I want again, to thank you all for helping us to organize this workshop. Colleagues from FAO, Mirella's support. I think she did not manage to join today, but together with Mirella. And thank you also, Jordanes, Alfonso, for your availability. We know that these are very busy times with many events happening. Oh, Mirella is here.
Here all the time. So just a
great.
little bit, but yes, I was following in the background.
Thank you. Great to see you again, Mirella. So thank you, for preparing this workshop. Also to my colleagues from Ricardo Energy Environment, with whom we prepared the thematic topics to learn and to understand what will be interesting, what are the needs of the countries in different areas of the land use sector, so we can provide such updates, so we provide some information and knowledge on the existing tools. So many thanks to Ricardo, colleagues, Marcelo, Kai, John, for organizing this. And also from the Greenhouse Gas Inventory Research Center, we closely collaborated also in defining the scope for this workshop. So I would like to thank Milan and Munjung that participated in this 3 days workshop. What we want to take up and follow on based on this 3 days workshop, maybe I can quickly share what we would consider in moving forward, and I will just share only a few slides since we know that we are behind, but I think it will be important to make clear that we don't want to, we will not forget what has been discussed here, what points were raised here today. So we hope that the inputs that were provided during this workshop, we will make use of them part of our collaboration with our partners in the regions, as I mentioned, with the Greenhouse Gas Inventory Research Center, with FAO, with Global Support Program, and others who are active in the region, to develop for the region workshops that address a dedicated topic, whether it will be again preparing for the BTR reporting, for example, the tool that was presented at the first day on the BTR guidance and roadmap tool, jointly developed by PATPA and FAO. Also, we might consider having a dedicated workshop, as we also mentioned now today, to provide more detailed technical guidance or training on specific tools and methods how to improve GHG inventory. We will be also using some inputs and thoughts shared today in preparing our next virtual workshop for the region that we plan for November and December this year again. So please reach out to us and share again your thoughts and ideas that you would like also to see in this virtual workshop at the end of this year. And then also at the regional level, we are happy that we are continuing the collaboration to support the GIR UNFCCC CAST program that is providing trainings to many countries, including from Asia region, but also globally, how to enhance their capacities in preparing GHG inventory. Concerning the specific support to countries, also referring to what Paolo mentioned and also Alfonso mentioned, many colleagues mentioned this today, how to provide support to countries in using tools and setting up or enhancing the institutional frameworks. At PATPA, we have the Climate Transparency Help Desk. Ask for support. So this is the support that is targeted and developed based on the country needs, and we cover different aspects of support, whether it is the review of the GHG inventories, preparing for the BUR reports. So these are different aspects that can be requested by countries via the Climate Transparency Help Desk. And the modes of delivery, they vary, so they can be support to do a technical review for a certain sector. There can be workshops and trainings on how to use various tools, and including those tools that were also presented today. So I also encourage you to make use of this Climate Transparency Help Desk. And the eligibility, basically most or the majority of the countries in the region are eligible to request support from the Climate Transparency Help Desk, as long as it's reflecting the needs of the country, of the government, and that it is also contributing or complementing the existing work that is being done, for example, by other partners in the region. Then we also are happy to make available the different knowledge products. Some of those you already heard here today, and I think they also really nicely link to the different topics that were mentioned. We have a really nice compilation of good practices from many countries on how these countries have used different tools and have applied them in their country context. So please check this summary report on the good practice database. You can also check the different tools for certain sectors. For example, for the waste sector, we just published an interesting tool. These tools are available on our website, but also we can provide trainings and workshops on applying these tools, as I mentioned, during in the framework of the Climate Transparency Help Desk. So these are some of the aspects that I wanted to mention, but again, please feel free to reach us to us in case if you still have any questions, any proposals on how to collaborate with us in the future. And as I also mentioned, we will be sharing all the resources from these 3 days workshop with you, and and we will also make them available, as I mentioned, on our website. So please, stay tuned and check for the email messages that you will receive from me or from our colleagues with all the information and outcomes of this workshop. So with that, I think we are running out of time, but please, in case if someone wants to still do the final comment, and if not, then I'm happy to close today's workshop. Thank you all.